Greetings, salutations, guys, gals, people, pals. It's Gentleman Mr. Turtle, and we're back here with the Friday Fighters Community Podcast. We're here talking about tier list, the community wiki tier list, and everything related to it in terms of like criteria, why, numbers, who or where, and why are they there, and so on and so forth. Because it's overall um, just context. Uh, One of the wonderful pillars of the community, Bookish, is working on a wiki that, alongside other members of the community, he's just spearheading it, gathering a lot of information, a lot of different assets, and trying to make this uh, the end all be all of information location for any levels, whether you're free to play, um, small spender, or whale. This is where you're going. And um, initially, I was doing the community tier list, but it was more of word of mouth, just saying, hey, where do you think this goes, or whatever. But this one actually has data and numbers backing it up. So I wanted to break down um, what these maybe data, the numbers mean, and break issues around, and he can break it down a little bit on how he's running it or how it's working so far.
Yeah, 100%. I'm here.
So, do you think you could break down the numbers or the tier list a little bit on like the criteria and what we're working with, so we could have an understanding a little bit on it?
Sure. So I can kind of talk about my general approach, why I made the list, and how the metrics work, and how it all came together. So I've had a pretty vocal opinion about tier lists basically since the game started. I think most attempts at tier lists are either overly confusing and they get too lost in the weeds of the details, or they're just like complete crap loaded with biases 4 months old that like weren't even true at the time, and they just don't get updated. So like the two major points of my tier listing project was to, one, reframe the conversation about how we tier characters, because comparing Gormagala Ken to Elena is like not productive in multiple senses. One character is limited that you can't even get. One character's damage, the other character's support. They play different roles in modes. You can play them at the same time, etc. So like the way that we tackle tiering things as a community is very like, well, do we worry about whales? Do we worry about max characters? Should this be helping new players? Should you know what I mean? There's so much. So like every person who makes tier lists makes like 5 of them, and they all have valid reasons to exist, but there's no real resource that credibly goes like, okay, this is a good way to kind of shape your box towards these units. This sort of tiering will kind of give you a general direction for things that will help you in an overall sense. Obviously, there are going to be exceptions. There are going to be conversations that need to be had. There are going to be mode specific tier lists and like end game tier lists and all those other, because like tier lists are fun. People like doing it. People like having their opinions and talking about this stuff. And I don't want to discredit that or like stop people from having those conversations. But the problem is currently the tier list situation is such that people are coming places going, I've been working on my Mad Ryu forever and everyone is telling me he's garbage now. Now what do I do? And that's just not really helping anyone when we can just have the simple conversation of like, yeah, Mad Ryu is a fine unit, but he's not useful everywhere. And that really does hurt you in a game where the amount of investment you make into characters, you get a return on that. And you can either have a really low return because you made the wrong investment, or you can have a really high return because you're kind of clicking on all cylinders. So what I did was I asked everyone in the community that was either notable or a content creator or a community helper or a top tier player in a zone or something, and I gave them a survey. And the survey was basically just a simple, don't compare Elena to Street Poison. Don't compare this carry to that carry. Just in PvE, is this character strong, average, or weak? In PvP, is this character strong, average, or weak? And in bossing, is this character strong, average, or weak? And other criteria like that. And I had over 30 people eventually ended up responding, and they'd rated, I think, 40 some odd characters, because like we're not overly worried about the Relentos and the C's and B's and all that, in 5 different categories. And then I took those responses and basically turned them into a single score in each mode, averaged those out, made an overall balanced score for each mode, made a cars wish list that kind of balanced the strength of the individual car garage passives against the general tier lists and like the mode specific tier lists and that sort of things. So now we have, I won't say it's an objective way to tell how strong characters are against others, because like when I look at the data, I see obvious things that are wrong, things that should be changed simply because it's clear that some people were responding based on information they had at the time, or ideas about the characters that were more word of mouth rather than like true hands-on experience. So there are outliers in the data, particularly in the newer characters, where it's kind of like a little more hit and miss. But the sheer number of responses and the smoothing that the math does to make sure that none of that like outlying data has too much of an effect, gives us a good impression of like, okay, so we pretty much know that these clusters of characters towards the top of the list are at least known to be strong, and the ones towards the bottom are either known to be actively bad or they don't have a clear purpose in the game to the extent that they shouldn't be recommended. And then in the middle tiers, you have a lot of people where you start arguing over the details of like, well, athlete Chun Li should be a little bit better than Summer Yang or something like that. But at the end of the day, you're basing that on percentage points that are like 7% difference in responses, which can be one person thought this character was strong in a mode more than they thought this other character was average in that same mode. So now there's a 0.02% difference in their coefficients, and that's the difference between them being. It's not really like, oh my gosh, athlete Chun is 100% better. You can't really view the tier list like that so much as just general stratas of understanding, so to speak. And I think that was about it.
So I would actually like to verbally throw out what one of the tier lists that you have, just the general one. I'll also put an image on the video for when this is on YouTube. But right now we have for SSS, M Bison, Fashion Blanca, B Zangief, Street Poison, Evil Ryu, Elena, and Akuma. That's a spicy. I like it. I love it. SSS, SS is Guile, Sea Viper, Dawson.
Also,
Yep.
sorry, just to plug in one little neat thing about the tier list. But
Mm-hmm.
if you just take the first 4 characters on the tier list and make a team, you can go to chapter 40.
Yeah, Bison, Blanca, Beast, Zangief, and Poison. Pretty much.
I just like the way, because like the rubric ended up such that I made like 7 character buckets all the way down, just kind of divided them up evenly. But inside of the buckets, I was able to shuffle them around just for presentations purposes, and I found it nice that I was able to put a free to play accessible team right at the top of the tier list in a way that actually made sense and was data backed.
And I also like that you have for the SS tier, the top 3 DPSs that are people could just make a team, pick one and make a team off of. We have Gaio, Sea Viper, Dawson. Then we have Rose, Summer Yang, Chung Li, Sagat, and Athlete Chung Li. S tier is Trendy Cami, E Honda, Zangief, Vega, Jury, Abel, and Gen. And A tier, Fei Long, Maya Cody, Mad Ryu, Cami, Poison, Guy, and Yang. B tier, Yun, Blanca, DiCapri, Makoto, Adon, Hugo, Dudley, and the last but not least, C tier DJ, Combat Guile, T Hawk, and Charming Dudley.
And I have to make it clear in every angle, in every chart, in every way, by every coefficient, Charming Dudley is the worst character in the game, and it's not even close. The only close one is T Hawk. Combat Guile pretty comfortably hovers around third or fourth worst. And then the fifth worst, you'll get like Dudley's, DJ's, Makoto's, that sort of thing, hovering around there, depending on the mode you're talking about. But yeah, C Dudley, something needs to be done with him. His kit is just very undertuned.
Yeah, so I was looking at C Dudley previously because of, I think what is it, Control? Let me look at his kit real quick. Oh my god, what faction is he under? Okay. The Black Rose Mark. Black Rose Mark, inflicting immediate duration of Black Rose target has Black Rose 20% of healing and receives will be transferred to Charming Dudley. I wanted to know if that's considered control.
That is not.
Is
So I
not.
actually have
Okay.
that in the glossary. One moment, let me pull it up.
Because some of his kit with it, all of his kit deals with Black Rose, from my understanding, but it does certain things like his C1 makes Black Rose the pressure is reduced by an additional 15%, and then level 3 dodge is reduced.
So this is where the wiki is actually being practically helpful for the first time on live TV. Hi, Mom. So in the mechanics glossary of Gen, which is one of the pages I recently made, control immunity. Control includes silence, stun, charm, and taunt. That is explicitly listed in the game, so it will not affect healing.
Silence, stun, and what was it again?
I posted a screenshot in the chat.
Okay.
Silence, stun, charm, and taunt. Those are the 4 control effects in the game. So as long as anything in the game is not either one of those 4 things or said it's specifically considered to be one of those 4 things, it will not be considered a control effect for things like control immunity and control insight and the other stat. I forget what control resilience I want to call it, which are the things that shorten and lengthen control effects. There are, I believe, Vega's C3. The Sublime Bleed is called out as being a type of bleed effect. So I know they do that sort of naming type of convention in the game. As far as I know, all the control effects are just straight up stuns, silences, charms, and taunts. There's nothing that goes by a different name that's considered to be one of those 4 things yet, but based on how Sublime Bleed works and it counts as a bleed, I would assume that to be a thing eventually.
Do we know how poison works? Because poison is in Shadowloo. Does anyone know how poison works? How it's implemented?
Street poison or regular poison?
No, the effect poison. You know, I don't know
Oh,
the card where it
yeah,
says your normal hit has a X% chance to do poison.
We don't have much more information.
The reason why I ask is because Mummy Dawson may deal with poison. I don't know if it's the same type or like same coding or whatever. That's why I'm just curious as how poison in general is dealt with in game at the moment.
Well, I would imagine anything that Mummy Dawson does that deals with poison or cares about poison, or any fighter that cares about poison, will probably only care about poison from fighters. The only thing in the game that's not true for is Dhalsim's plus 30 can double the Ken's X moves flame proc.
Yeah.
But that's a very like specific and generic, any burn stacks get doubled for the next 15 seconds kind of thing. Yeah. So as long as it's not something like that, I don't know that Mummy Dhalsim would interact with Shadowloo City's buff in that way. Like, I don't think it would see that as a thing that his team was doing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that would be cool, but that makes sense though. So, for the tier list, Hicks, I wanted to ask you because of the banner that you fly. What is your opinion on how the community rates, and like, do you also agree on the what book says that Bison, Fashion Blanca, Bisengi, Street Poison will take you to chapter 40?
I mean, if you have all the levels that the game provides you, then yeah, any that team can work. I don't know if any team can work at that point, but in how effective Fashion Blanca is, it starts to go down, but it's not like he's bad or anything like that. But then it's like certain units can get you there, but in certain units just gets you there faster or easier with lower requirements.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're saying it can get you to chapter 40 with this requirements, then you can like say yes or no. But then if the question is that open, then yeah, then definitely they can reach there for sure.
And what do you mean by effectiveness goes down? What? How does that
It's
work?
it's like, okay, for burn and other stats, it's like defense shred and stuff like that. The value of that gets higher because the enemies are a lot harder, so then they have more defense, so then they mitigate more. But then with those mechanics where you don't have to, like if their defense scales are way out of hand, then regular multiplier moves like just straight up attacks and stuff like that, it's less effective because burn and defense shred and other mechanics basically has better value as the opponents has higher defense, which they are in higher stages. So you start to see that like normal, like Viper is doing not so much for me in normal campaign, like as a damage dealer, yeah, especially even her super, compared to like Dalsim C3 and then what it provides with his stacks, or um, OG Giles defense shreds C3. So then her viability is it's still a really good unit, but then at a certain point, it's like a switch where then this starts to be better, and that's why in a lot of PVE tier lists they have um, like early game tier lists, maybe up to chapter 20 or something like that, and then mid game tier list 20 until 30 or 36, and then end game is when two team starts or something like that. And then those tier lists start to change because certain units gets better over the progression of the game, and other units work as well as good, or it isn't. Like at the beginning stage, Viper's way better just because the defense ignore that you get, and also depends on the investments you are, because Viper you can use it at the get-go. Like Viper is definitely better just because raw multiplier stats is the way to go, and the other outliers where as far the higher you are, like the graph is like maybe Gal's under, and at a certain chapter 28 or 29 or 30, then Gal gets a little bit more better in clearing just because his mechanic of defense threat scales way better in the later stages. So that's why burn and poison and stuff, it's going to be good because they tick straight to the HP.
Yeah, I noticed that about Dalsim somewhere in the, I want to say like chapter 33 or 34, a 2 rotation from Dalsim would just clean everything out without even trying. Like I'd barely even have to land one interrupt and it would just smoke everything. It starts getting a little ridiculous there. Whereas
Yeah.
like other carries like Chun-Li, I would have to literally hit 4 or 5 interrupts in a row and then die to their last thing anyway, and it would just be like, oh come on.
And this is actually why if you use a Fashion Blanca, you cannot progress as high as you can without a Bison, because yes, he does burn, but it's not as much. So his super and his C2 doesn't do as much damage in the later stages. But with Bison's shadow attack, that's like also going ignoring the defense, I think, because with units that does multiple attacks and the ticks from the C2 and the super itself, it procs the Bison's shadow attack a lot. So you have two means of basically ignoring their high scaling. So those two, it's like mandatory. You cannot run them without it.
So that's probably why I'm able to. That's probably why I got to where I am without B thingy, because I'm right now I'm stuck on chapter 3312, but my
Mm-hmm.
team consists of Bison, Fashion Blanca, Dawson, Elena. So
Yeah.
and my Bison is at Fighting Spirit 30. So regardless of the combo rotation, whether it's Dawson starting or Fashion Blanca starting, I'm triggering Bison's shadow thing at least 4 times minimum, depending on who starts the combo. But I'm always ending with Dawson, so I'm always getting six procs off of that alone. So I think with that, like with the scaling of burn, and I think uniquely with the combo, because how you said, Fashion Blanca's burn is minuscule, but it's not minuscule when Dawson is there, because for 50 seconds every burn is doubled. So
Mm-hmm.
every single tick, even the single one that Fashion Blanca will do, that matters. That matters, and it sometimes you'll get lucky where Blanca is just like, you know what, I'm gonna grace you with like 3 burn, and just because of that, and Dawson just there, he's like, "Thank you. Now I have 6." It's just like that quick and random with the RNG. Um, and I think that has allowed me to hit above my weight and not have the need of interrupt, because I also use a lot of heal EXs and assist,
You
like
should,
tank assists and stuff like that.
if you're running, hello, hello. Um, that's the exact team I'm running for my 2 team fights. Like that team does more damage than my Gal team just because of how much procs that they get with the burn and also the shadow attack. But then I still have a mode of interrupt in E Honda. But to be fair, that team performs like really good. And now I need to separate Dulcim and Fashion Blanca and Bison just because there's 3 teams. But it's still
I'm
manageable.
thinking about that. I'm legitimately thinking about splitting Fashion Blanca and Dawson up. Um, but because I'm not at the 2 team thing yet, but I like to start prepping so that when I do get to that 2 team thing, I'm not like running around like a chicken with a head cut off. I have a concept, I have an idea, and working on
Mm-hmm.
getting the equipment and stuff like that. That's why Mummy Dawson is super 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 important for me, and the turtles are super important for me, because that's my teams. That like because I'm also noticing, because you mentioned if they keep the same kit, Mummy Dawson doesn't have a C3, and if I have to split up Fashion Blanca and Dawson, then I might put Dawson as one team, and then Fashion Blanca as my second team,
Yep.
and then Turtle as my third team. It depend. I'm praying I can get all 4 turtles, but I'll be happy with 2. I'm aiming for at least one triple S. I'd be satisfied with 2, and I'm praying that I can do all 4. But that probably not likely, because I don't have the funds. Yeah, I'll set up a GoFundMe like help Turtle get turtles.
Yeah. Funkos.
Blanca Chumney team and Dr. Mummy down in another team. With the Fashion Blanca, I was thinking I don't have Chung Li built up, but I was thinking of poison, because like um I was that's why I was like, I need to know how Mummy Dawson works, because like poison Thunder Team, OG Blanca, do something weird like that. What are your 2 team states?
I mean, both of them. If you want to go high deficits, it like interrupting or damage mitigation is basically a must. So either you don't take any damage by like pushing them in a corner and then just manipulating their animation is another way to mitigate the damage. There you can use Abel's shields to mitigate the damage completely. You can also use E Honda's C3 to mitigate any range damage, which is clutch if you're fighting like an OG poison, which all her attacks, all her C2, her super, not her C3 though, you can get it's all absorbed into E Honda. So then those mechanics to mitigate combos at all is needed in the high deficit, and the way to do that is just to interrupt them so then you don't take the damage at all anyways. So you can prioritize all your resources in damage, so then you don't you tick mark the survivability check by having interrupts or damage mitigation from C3 or Able Shield or anything like that, and then you check mark on the damage wall or damage check by just focusing all your resources into damage after you settle with an interrupter or survivability here. So
Yeah, go ahead.
go ahead.
No. I wanted to supplement what you were saying with the PVE tier list that we have on the wiki.
Yeah.
So with the tier list, we have the mandatory units of Bison, Beast, and Geef. I love the statement that's written here is that there's no real way around this fact. Regardless of the rest of your team composition, you'll be making life quite a bit more difficult if you're not running these two fighters. Once you get into two-team content, you'll need to get a little bit more flexible in what strategies you employ. And as the very forefront leader of the anti-Beast and Geef party, I will agree with that statement. If you're not using Beast and Geef, you're making life a little bit harder for yourself, a little bit harder than you should be. Yeah, I mean, there's just no way around it. My only caveat that I will say is that with great power comes great responsibility, and how you use Beast and Geef. If he gets you to, if Beast and Geef gets you to the motherland of chapter 36, understand that with that power has a great price. You'll be stuck there for a hot minute. You know, you might be stuck at that chapter 36 for a month or 2 or 3. Just saying.
Exactly.
All right, can someone talk about the summer April League? All we know is that there are data miners who've been able to look at the codes of the game or whatever data miners do. I'm not pretending to be familiar with any of this stuff. All I know is that they have been able to gather some information, and the expected units of Summer Buki, Mummy Dawson, and other units have been quote unquote leaked or surfacing around. They're out there, but nothing is confirmed by any staff or anyone from the A Plus or Crunchyroll or Top Droid. So all of this is speculation, and again, it's just what people are quote unquote finding out there. Okay, I guess you didn't like that answer, but yeah. So what I was saying, back to the speech of Beast and Geef and stuff like that. So yeah, don't be. I'm hard headed. I'm stubborn. I got my own gripe against them. But if you really want to like play this game on easy mode, Beast and Geef and Bison are the way to go about it. Then the viable carries, Gaio, Fashion Blanca. I don't want to mention this one, but I have to because he is there for a big chunk of player base. Is Gore Magala Ken, Viper, Akuma, Dawson, Evil Ryu, and we're in it now, so jump on the bandwagon, Virgil and Chung Li. It sucks that Poison's not there, but I get it. I get it. It makes sense. Then the viable tanks. I got distracted. Viable tanks. E Honda, Nero. I want to talk on Nero a little bit. Abel, Sagat, and Zangief. First of all, Sagat's considered the tank now.
Yeah, I mean he can tank just because his passive procs multiple times, but most of the characters go in front of him sometimes, so he can't. He doesn't. He's not as flexible as Bison to be like the front tank because sometimes positions mess you up. For example, if you want to use him and Gormagal
Mm-hmm.
Cam will be in front of him.
Okay. Wait, in front
So
of Nero?
no, in front of
Oh, in front of Sagat. Sorry, because he's
so,
balanced, right?
yeah.
Wait, but what is Ken?
Ken is also balanced.
See, one of the things I wish is like if you had two units fighting for the same spot, I wish you could pick which one goes where. In that one instant, like if they're both balanced, let me push the guy in front of Ken.
I think they have just an innate value, just how they just max out the value of well, not max out.
It would be nice to be able to put Honda in front of or behind other tanks as need, like be able to move his bullet wall that he starts to fight. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh man, that. I mean, I get why they're doing it. It's a little bit more strategic in terms of team building and concepts and stuff like that. But the restriction of like not being able to move it sucks in some extent. All right, so in terms of like interrupt and team building for the future and two teams and Beast and Give obviously being so super important and Bison being so super important. Um, how do you and like how we spoke about dividing the Dawson with Blanca and so on and so forth? How do you start thinking about what do you do when you start thinking about building a team? Like in terms of requirements, especially at the higher level, when you say damage is king, but survivability is important, but you need to be able to heal, you need to be able to do so many different things at that high level. Obviously, it's different in the terms of maybe a casual or a non-tryhard. So in that extent, that's why I like to throw out the caveat of if you're using Beast then give, you're most likely tryharding. So like you guys are up there. You guys like would like to speak on that a little bit.
So generally, when I'm building a team composition, I'm looking at the skill bar first and foremost. And because the game is so oriented around damage and like whether or not you can get that first thing to die and break their combo chain or otherwise make your life a lot easier, um, damage walls are basically the vast majority of the game. You're very rarely actually checked on survivability to the extent that if you could just kill them faster, you'd probably survive easier. That ends up being true more often than not. So most of the time when I'm starting a multi-team content, I'll start with the core of the team in terms of how it's going to do damage. So I'll pick a carry and I'll go, okay, that carry is going to use, for example, ult and C2. So I know if I'm using ult and C2, I'm not going to have access to Beast Zangief for that team. So I need to look at other ways that can interrupt that are either C1s or C3s. And then once that's filled in, okay, I have another team slot that's open. That'll be either the remaining C3 or the remaining C1. And that I'll want to either fill in with a damage boost or another person that's using a sort of a carry type skill to do extra damage or a survival skill, someone like Rose, that sort of thing, to kind of fill in what's remaining. And then the fourth slot will either be the tank if they're not on the skill bar in some way, or it'll be a character that works when they're not on the skill bar. So like a character like Rose or Gormagala Ken or an Evil Ryu, or it will just be a character that's useful to have in a team comp like a Fei Long or something, just standing there not doing anything just because of how his passive works. Jen is the same way, that sort of thing. That's my overall approach. Is I'm not really trying to tackle it from the top down. I'm more coming at it from the skill bar, like trying to plug in those slots, and then whatever remaining slots I have left on the team, I'll fill in with the most generic, the useful things that I have left.
So would you say that combos is one of the most important things in the game?
Sorry, one more time.
Would you say combos is the most important thing in the game when in terms of team building?
Yeah, the overall composition, like what the combo chain, like what combo chains it has access to.
Yeah.
Especially when you get into later play, you start getting into more manual only chains, doing stuff like weaving Dulcim C1 into a rotation and then using Dulcim C3 on the next one. Or like in the recent bossing event, you saw people who were using like Guile ult on the first rotation and then Sea Viper ult on the remaining rotations and like weird stuff like that, positioning oriented stuff. So like you always pretty much have to start with that combo chain and what your team has access to first. Because, for example, a team that home doesn't have access to C3s can't ever work, even if you plug an E-Ryu into that team, that E-Ryu doesn't have a C3 to trigger off of. Now, half your team doesn't do anything half the time. You're going to lose no matter what you do, even if it's the 4 best units in the game, E-Ryu, Akuma, F. Blanca, and B. Zangief. Congrats, no one has a C3. Half your combo chain doesn't work. You're going to die every time.
I want to touch on, but I want to hear Tix's opinion on what you have to say on the team buildings and stuff.
I mean, I agree. Like for me, when I look at the two teams battle, it's always just interrupts because you cannot handle high deficit without interrupting. And we also have like damage sources that Gal scales good with defense shred and Dalsim with the shadow attacks and the burns. That scales pretty high in high deficit content. But you start to look at the team where, okay, my first interrupter is E Honda, and then the second one is B Zangief. So in the two teams fight, it's you can see which one is easier to interrupt with E Honda and which one is with B Zangief. You can just use any team. It's a plug and pick which the harder team is and put B Zangief over there. The first team, it's always E Honda, and you start to think, if the front unit is the one that is supering, then it's a pretty easy time with E Honda, right? Mm-hmm. But then you start to have to be creative on how to tackle with the front most units only being the one that's interruptible with E Honda. So then you start to use like Passion Blanca super to push everyone back, and then E Honda coming in and then attacking it right on. Just for example, like Jury comes all the way to the front, so that you can E Honda interrupt with the EX move, like the freezing EX move technique, where you press it at the same time they do their animation. It prolongs the animation overall. So using that makes a bigger window for E Honda to interrupt, like pushing, and then Gao comes to the front, or who else? Anyone that's in the C2 that goes to the front when they super, it's easy for E Honda. But in some cases, two of the units, like Combat Gal and OG Poison, supers from the back, like all the way from the back. So then you start to see how to fight that. Like, okay, then I need to charm them. So then the second slot is available. So then the second unit can interrupt. And in the next rotation, I can't handle OG Poison, right? So you have to see, how do I handle OG Poison's attack? So you use E Honda's combo 3 instead of the interrupt combo 1. So then all the damage from the combo is absorbed, the C2 and the super. So then you start to look at small puzzle pieces to complete that chapter. Okay, in every single double team battle, you start to have a different approach in every single thing, because you say, okay, this doesn't work, and then how are you gonna do it to solve that? Maybe if I had Virgil's EX move, that would have had a more like having a lot of arsenals in your bag is also pretty powerful because you have more puzzle pieces to play with to fit in which one is correct. And like for example, Zangief's 6 out of 6 would have come in clutch in certain fights, especially with Bison when he was face tanking. It was a two teams fight, and Bison was included in there. Other units that has special niches like Chun Li's C3. She's the only mega battery character. Like having super unique skills is also beneficial if you have it on hand because you can just plug and play it. And that is for a story campaign. Like it's mainly that. But if you start to go to a third team, because I was only talking about two teams battle, and then you add in another team, then you start to see how am I supposed to interrupt or mitigate their damage. That could be either C2 of street poison using the charm, or having someone else also to interrupt, which is less reliable. Like Gan, Guy is also there, but it's pretty inconsistent. You can go OG Dudley. Other units, they will have a slot in my team just because I need them for to mitigate damage. Like I cannot run any team without an interrupt or any way to stop their combo chain. And then going for bosses, you can see like Bookish said positioning is key. Like with the Virgil boss, you can see two for Fashion Blanca to avoid the damage window or the damage frame altogether. So then you just clicking on the exact same time that he's about to move plays a role.
I want you to continue that top idea. I just want to give people context. We also have a Boston tier list. Top 5: Flame Chun-Li, M Bison, Fashion Blanca, Street Poison, Evil Ryu, Boston Carry, Trendy Cammy, Gourmet Ken, Dawson, Gaio, Chun-Li, Sea Viper, Akuma, Vega. Go ahead.
Yeah, Rama, I know.
I wanted to give more context to the unit that you're about to talk about.
Yeah. So Ramos in the chat said that S Yang C1, where he surfs all the way in the enemy, like that special niche. Even though if you use Elena C1, Elena's going to be at the back. But then since S Yang's all the way there, if a single target unit like Jury or Kami attack the frontmost target unit, or Mad Ryu, S Yang is going to surf his way there and bait them to do the attack way in their own formation field, so then the attack won't go anywhere near your actual team. So using the Summer Yang's positioning to your advantage, like small things in your playthrough that you can use to enhance your damage, even though it might seem skill.
You're preaching the gospel truth. I think it was two days ago. I got a story, Don. I'm gonna put you in the spotlight. I was watching this man's brain work on another level, and I was like, this man is a master of the game. He's playing and he's doing the bossing, and he's like, I'm not getting the same damage, or no. He said they're not moving the way they're supposed to, and I'm just like sitting here like, and he's like, look, don't you see it? And I'm just like, I don't see shit, bro. Me personally, I'm not seeing anything. I'm like, the game is gaming. And then he's like, oh, I figured it out. And I'm just like, And then he goes, he changes thing, and then he fixes it. And then they start grouping up, and he's like, see, I fixed it. And I'm just like, wait, what did you notice? Like, how did you notice this? But then he noticed his bar was going too fast, that he had fast chant on. Just that one little thing messed up his whole run. And I'm just like, my mind is blown. I was just like, no way. That's not, but it did. It changed the run completely. Because he was doing he was doing it like 3-4 times. The units weren't moving. He changed fast chant, the units started moving.
I mean, like in that situation, right? Like if you're going to unknown, the hardest part is to have a general idea of what team that might work. and then you put it into practice, and then either someone refines that and makes it better, or build upon that and make something new. But then as you play, you start to discover the weaknesses or missed opportunities with other units instead of the current one, or different playstyles by just repeating over and over and seeing. And one of the important things to like build upon your current team or to test it is to start supering an exact different time, because doing the supers in different location, like I might do it maybe when it reaches the third unit, or I always start with every fight to wait until the supers at the end, and then see what that doing it at that time would give. If you consistently press the buttons at the exact same time, they're gonna have similar results. So then if you do it this early, this animation for this one unit or the animation of the boss might have done something, and maybe the position is better in different small amounts of time frame. And especially if you are stacking with poison, another example, and then you press all your animations, but then because the boss does their animation, that will break your street poison stacks chain because their animation's too long. But then if you have the exact same C2 or C3 open, or C1 open right when they super, then you basically cancel their animation, so then you can freely stack your poison stacks without any hitches. And having that small animation difference plays a big role overall. So then what I would do is just go and super at this time, and then maybe hold like a few super or indication bars back, see how that performs, go a little bit back, see how that performs, and then you start to gauge, this is what I can expect with different test spots, and then you build upon that test spot, and then you find the optimal combo rotation and stuff like that.
One of the things that I love about this game is that anyone willing to put the time into this game can do that. So, for example, Tix is the free-to-play legend, is fighting and topping versus some whales because of the understanding of mechanics of the game. Obviously, if a whale puts that time and effort, that's what I'm saying. All it takes is time and effort to be.
And this is what go ahead.
No, that's it.
That this is what, like, most of the whales that ask help or start to get lost is when they have so much project or so much like shiny things that they're blinded on what they actually need, because they're obligated. Since they spend that money, they need to build it. Sometimes it's not the best, or they're more like, okay, I have so much things to play around with, I'm lost on who to pair with who, because it's not conventional. Not a lot of people have it, so then it's more unknown territory, and then they just end up,
It gets
not
overwhelming with a lot of options at that point. I definitely.
exactly like who to 6 out of 6, because I have so much units. Who to prioritize because everyone is good. Like having that option makes you lost and swaying in your path, not reaching your end goal.
Yeah, the efficiency, min maxing, like it is. That's where if you're spending, my one request for anyone that's choosing to spend, outside of obviously making sure you're good and that you can spend and you're not addicted, all that stuff like that, is that you think before you just start chucking cash. And even if you got it like that, where you're just like, screw it, I'm gonna throw bans and bans and bans and bans. My question to you is, if you're throwing bans like that, wouldn't you want your account to reflect you drop into bans like that? Because I've seen whale accounts where they've dropped like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9K, and they're no better than a free to play that actually knew what they were doing. But then
Yeah.
I've also seen a whale account where they drop the bans, and you're like, okay, you're number one in the world. Do you, people?
I
This
mean,
led
it's
so
like
well how valuable the bases are. Do you think so? Can you speak on that? I would love for you to speak on that.
the OG units,
The
the
OG
current.
units. Are you near Mike yet, or you still up and about? Because I'd love for you to speak on that, because that's what these tier lists are about, is giving people options. Obviously, power creep is a thing. Obviously, we have, for the most part, collabs and the new spicy units are what people are into. But that doesn't mean that old units aren't like boss.
Yeah, I mean,
10 minutes. Okay, cool.
for me, I can somewhat answer it.
Yeah.
It's just because they like some units perform better than others, and you're basically paying for like availability of like you have now another unit for this is better if you understand how to continue or strategize for that current content that you're handling, then that is powerful to have more units than not. But like some people, they just neglect not a lot of people build or whales spend on Guile, right? Now they want, because how much everyone is enjoying him, and then they're just like sometimes the kit of the OG unit, you just look at Sea Viper. Like Sea Viper has so much in her kit, and it's basically a must build. Even like comparing it to an Infernal or Master, I would say Sea Viper. If she had the exact same kit and she's Infernal or Master, she's a really good build, like must build. It's just because she provides so much to the team, and we're just blinded that she's an OG unit. It doesn't mean it just means that she's more readily available, but she provides a lot to the team with her cars, with her FS, with her armor energy buffs and her damage itself, and the assassin ability just attack the back row. Like if she was an Infernal Master, people would also recommend to build her.
Do you now? Is that really the case when like jury exists and not many people recommend building her?
Yeah, I mean, if she was an OG unit, then people would say, "Hey, yeah, her assist is nice. Build her for
But
assist
she
only."
technically is the OG unit. Technically.
Yeah,
Jury's been out long enough that people can build her.
red, is it red, green, blue? Like people can associate the OG. I would say OG unit. I would refer it to RGB, red, green, and blue units.
Okay.
And
Okay, so
so that,
not black and white. Or red
yeah,
and dark and
not
white,
black and
whatever.
white. Yeah, RGB units. They are important, and sometimes some of them is better than the actual Infernal or Master.
Mm-hmm.
And Jury being, I would build her, right, if she was an RGB unit. But if she was an Infernal, I wouldn't justify myself to buy pay a high price tag just for someone that could, for some a character that does not perform as good as an RGB unit itself.
So because of the cost, it changes everything completely, basically.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, OG units usually mean launch unit. Yeah, that's where I was going with. Book hit it on the nail on the head. Uh, the term OG was like everything that launched. I was like, Jerry launched with the game. What are you talking about? Like to me, she was the OG, but Elemental or RGB, yeah, it makes sense. So at the outside of Bison, because that's the problem is that Bison exists. How do you judge Inferno and Masters?
I
What
mean,
what makes one worth building? Because like as a casual player or as a free to play, realistically, they're not smart to have as a project outside of Bison because Bison is mandatory, almost unanimously. But That's why I said because Bison exists, it makes it hard because no other unit or no other Master Inferno compares to him. So
Okay.
outside of Bison, how do you judge an Inferno Master that makes it weak?
So I've taken the stance on Infernals and Masters that, like, after you've divination for your SS Bison and you've got a Bison with Fighting Spirit and all that, and you're kind of like, maybe you're circling the drain on getting your triple S Bison, or maybe you're transitioning to someone else, and you're like, what is my next project? I'm pretty much in the camp of just don't pick a bad one, and it's fine. Like, you are 100% okay if you like Rose's kit and you want to play Rose, just build Rose and Runner, or
What
Achun,
what
or
would be a
Sagat,
bad
or
one?
Trendy Cammy, or Vega, or literally, as long as they're not an actively bad one, you're fine. It's
What's the
gonna be
bad
fine.
one? What's a bad one that we have now?
The actively bad ones are obviously limited units that you can't get more copies of that aren't already triple S. You should probably stop prioritizing them. And I would say at the moment, again, because he's bugged, and that's like it. Like, if you want to build Jury, she's fine. She's totally good in PvP. She has a really powerful assist skill. She wants to be strong when she's an assist because then she lends attack stat as well. And she, does reasonable amounts of damage at, like, Path of Fire and stuff. I see my guildies and stuff using her. They're not really slouches, you know what I mean? So, like, she clearly can do damage. She's just power crept. But, like, if you actually like her and you like Jury, it's not really setting you back a ton to have a built Jury. You know what I mean? Like, you're going to use her. There's multi-team content, there's PvP, there's assist, all that kind of stuff. The stuff that really does set your box back is when you spend a ton of resources, but your limited unit is only an SS plus because you didn't quite get the last two copies. That's going to set you back quite a bit. You put a ton of resources into that, and now there's no real recoup for that. There's going to be a point in the game where you just stop using that character. Or in the case of, like, again, I put 350 boost stones into plus 31ing the guy. His fighting spirit basically has no text. That's a huge waste. But as long as, like, what you're interested in building after Bison isn't one of those known, like, hey, maybe think twice kind of issues, you are pretty much fine to just pick. Like, they all have real strengths and weaknesses. They are all viable at certain things, in even to the extent of being, like, best in class at certain things. And yeah, that does include Jury. Like, her assist is very, very strong. It's one of the most generically useful things in the game, and it's both offensive and defensive and gives speed and et cetera, et cetera. It's kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, I do agree her assist is strong, but then I think Sir Turtle's question was like, what units do you consider strong or who to prioritize?
Overall,
It's a mixture of. My question was, how do you judge? Like, what would be a good criteria to judge a Master Inferno that is not Bison? Because a lot of people like to compare units, and then what that leads into the part two of outside of Bison, who would be the next project?
Okay, so then for me, I would you have to, when a unit release Infernal Master or what you will call it, special summon, you have to have a plan to you have to know what your plan is when you use them, right? Or else you're spending on something that you don't know. So, like, I know I'm spending on Akuma and I know the team I'm gonna run with him. So then it's not like, oh shit, I have him, but how do I use him? I have this guy. People tell me to build this, but then now what, right? So then you don't have maybe the necessary key or key units for that team, or you don't have the pieces to make it work. So, like, if you want to summon for Vega, you better be how those two actually functions and what you're getting yourself into when you invest your resources into a unit. So when you do want to judge a character's value on if you should summon it or not, is by three different contents: PvP, bosses, and PvE, tower and challenges. And if people are saying Sagat is a must-have, you gotta look what content is he gonna help me in, like PvP and PvE. Now, if you weigh that content higher than the others. Maybe you value story a lot, right? And then he's a 30% you have to get, and then like a good solid in PvP but bad in bossing. Mediocre, not bad. Then okay, then he could be a good target if you value that mode and you want a unit for that mode, like maybe a second tank or whatever you want him to be used for PvP. And then how I gauge the weight of the content, or how priority that unit is for that content, is to scale. Okay, what rewards can I get? Like if I want to go to Final Showdown, if you want a PvP unit but you're not in Final Showdown, you're not in, then the value of that PvP unit that you invested in is it's not that high, because you're not utilizing what that unit is good at, which is in PvP, and you're not in that PvP bracket to actually benefit from the investment that you did. And if you that's why I value boss content the most, the highest, because the rewards that you get for the investment that you put, the return on investment is really high if you rather than investing in a story unit or something like that, because there is a certain
It's also worth noting that like your ROI from your chaptering and stuff, like once you push into 36, 37, 38, you're pretty much mechanically walled by the game at that point. Your return is stuff you've already got. You're basically limited to idle rewards at that point. Whereas the bossing side of things, that keeps coming back. That keeps being leaderboards that you can top. That keeps being over time rewards. So like chaptering is good to push early because you're getting all this low hanging fruit, but then later on, bossing and PvP becomes much better because you get this regular cycle of rewards.
exactly.
And yeah, I agree, Ramios, that the idle rewards are even just kind of bad, and they don't scale very well, even when you push up into chapter 40 and 41.
Yeah, exactly. So
If there was no bossing leaderboards, would this game be like dead out of water? Because it seems like that's what's keeping most of the people, well, at least in the server, around.
yeah, like with these type of game, you want to have like steady competition every time to retain their attention. If it's just the same stuff without any leaderboard, then why should there's no ways of not by flexing, but people are just innate want to show off and just like have a sense of pride and connection, emotional connection towards your progress or towards the content that you're facing. So then with these leaderboards, you're like, hey, oh shoot, like some players that are just newly going into raiding and then performing well, and then having that sense of pride and just like curiosity towards these events makes them to stay because they are more emotionally attached.
Yeah, no, dude. But books are talking about how constant on Christ Story, probably everyone fall off. I played like a day. I know you played
Yeah.
it. Can you like talk on like why? If do you still play it?
No, I stopped after a week because you start to do the same stuff again and again, and all you're doing is just watching the animation that already played again and again. And the animation is nice, but then I'm not really getting any sense of pride and accomplishment because like why I still don't get why people.
No leaderboards, no guilds, no community, no. It's a first person game that asks you to spend hundreds of dollars to gamble for what? Like I can buy a thing at a dollar store that lets me play poker in the bathroom. That's the same experience.
Exactly. I mean, you're like the enjoyment that you get is only contained towards yourself, and you can't like share it or multiply it with other players, right? Like right now, if you do spend, then you have those leaderboards, those communities that you're engaging in socially. Then that's what fuels you and makes you not regret your time that you spent or time and money that you spent on the game. Because yeah, spending all this money and then have nothing to show for it, that's how people get bitter and salty and quit the game, because they like these leaderboards thing is what makes people keep on spending, I would say, unless they just innately like love the game just as is, then they're fine with spending it. Like if I actually like the game, right? If I did spend it, I wouldn't regret it because I enjoyed this game and I got my money's worth, which is a free game. So I over got what I played.
Would when question for you specifically, Tix, is because I've asked you this last time, what would break you to spend? And you still didn't give like a definitive answer.